You know the feeling, right? Some faces are just wrong, not monstrous, not alien, but just close enough to human to be terrifying. You know it the second you see it. Something's off. Before your brain can even explain it, your body's already screaming, this isn't right. Psychologists call it the Uncanny Valley, a fancy term for a deep-rooted fear of things that look human but aren't. But have you ever wondered why we'd have an instinct like that? Our brains are ancient, shaped in a world of predators and prey long before we had machines or movies. So, what if this reaction is a ghost? What if it's the last trace of a time when the world wasn't just home to Homo sapiens? A time when there were other species that looked human but weren't. Some we lived with, some we bred with, and some we fought. Maybe the Uncanny Valley is more than just some weird quirk, and today we're going to break it down. This whole idea was first cooked up by a Japanese roboticist, Masahiro Mori, back in the 70s. He noticed that the more human-like a robot got, the more empathy people felt for it at first. But once it crossed a certain line, something weird happened. Instead of empathy, people felt discomfort, revulsion, even fear. The robot looked too human, but not quite right. That feeling dipped into what Mori called the Valley of the Uncanny. And it wasn't just robot, wax figures, prosthetics, CGI characters that didn't quite nail it. They all give off the same vibe. Something about those faces too close but subtly wrong triggers an automatic response. You don't have to think about it, it's instant deep in your mind. Which begs the question, why would we have this instinct at all? Our ancestors didn't evolve alongside robots or movie monsters. Instincts this strong and universal don't just show up for kicks. They evolve because, at some point, they kept our ancestors alive. Think about the fear of snakes. Primates, including us, are hardwired to fear serpents, and for good reason. In one study, researchers showed monkeys things that only vaguely looked like snakes, and even those crude shapes triggered stress. Why? Because for millions of years, snakes were deadly predators. Any primate that failed to see the danger didn't survive to pass on its gene. Now ask yourself, could the Uncanny Valley be that same kind of ancient warning system? A system designed to help us spot and fear other kinds of humans, ones that look like us, but weren't. The existence of this valley suggests that at some point in prehistory, there was a damn good reason to evolve a fear of faces that were almost human. So, what? Or who were we afraid of? For most of our evolution, we weren't alone. Modern humans didn't just pop up on an empty Earth. We emerged in a world already crawling with other hominins and our distant relatives. And let's be clear, our ancestors weren't always the top dogs. In fact, for a long time, they were prey way more often than they were predators. If you think Africa is dangerous today, you can't even imagine the hell our ancestors Homo erectus lived through. There were massive saber-toothed cats ready to pounce and territorial hippos that would tear you apart. But it wasn't just the animals. Back then, there were plenty of other hominids running around. Imagine your erectus ancestor is coming back from a hunt and mistakes a group of Homo habilis for his own family. That could easily be the last mistake he ever makes. Then there were the Australopithecines, who were still around 2 million years ago. These guys were seriously weird-looking with chimp-sized brains, but walking completely upright. You're taking a rest after a long day of hunting. You glance over to check on your kids, and you see some slim figure luring your child away. Before you can even grab your spear, the creature snatches your kid and is gone into the night. If you think being a parent is scary today, our ancestors might have had to deal with literal child predators, as in other species that probably ate our young. Other species, like Paranthropus, might have been more like passive observers. Some researchers have called them the cows of the human lineage, built for eating tons of plants. They might not have preyed on our kids, but their presence must have been eerie. They walked upright and were clearly related to us, but their proportions were just off. Massive jaws, sloping foreheads, small, wiry bodies, a constant reminder that they were not us. And if that wasn't enough, other even more distant apes roamed the landscape, like the giant baboon-like Dinopithecus, which was pure nightmare fuel. They had massive canines, and large males could weigh over 170 plebs. Picture their giant four-legged stance, fangs glistening with spit. Words can't describe how terrifying it would have been to run into an aggressive troop of those things. Okay, let's fast forward hundreds of thousands of years. Our species, Homo sapiens, is on the rise. But we're still not alone. In Africa, we lived alongside Homo naledi, a weird species with a mix of primitive and modern traits. Weirdly enough, even though we lived next to them for hundreds of thousands of years, we have no evidence that we ever interbred. Out west, we ran into another ghost hominid species that we only know about from the DNA of modern West Africans. Once we left Africa, the world only got stranger. To the north, we met the Neanderthals. They were extremely strong and also intelligent. We have a long, complicated history with them. We fought them, and we gradually assimilated with them. To the east were the Denisovans. And in Southeast Asia, we met the tiny Homo floresiensis, the hobbits, and another small-bodied species, Homo luzonensis. But here's the twist. Despite all the differences, we didn't just fear them. We know for a fact that modern humans interbred with at least 3 other species, Neanderthals, Denisovans, and that ghost hominid in Africa. So what does that mean? If the Uncanny Valley evolved to protect us, why were we also drawn enough to them to interbreed? Could this be why those almost human faces sparked such a complex reaction in us? A mix of fear and fascination? Well, there are a couple of theories, and they all trace back to deep survival needs. First, disease avoidance. In a world with no medicine, no doctors, and no clue about germs, recognizing subtle signs of illness could mean the difference between life and death. Pale skin, weird eyes, jerky movements. These were all clues that something was wrong. Fun fact, we likely inherited genital herpes from Paranthropus over 2 million years ago. Maybe that's an example of our instincts failing us. Second, identifying the dead. What's more uncanny than a corpse? It's still eerily human, but it's devoid of life. For ancient humans, the dead could mean danger, disease, or predators nearby. Our brains may have evolved to spot that fine line between life and death, and to react to anything that falls near it. That's why horror movies use pale, lifeless skin and unnatural movements to scare us. It taps right into that ancient instinct. But there's a third idea, one that brings us back to those shadowy figures in the forest, enemy recognition. For hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors faced other humans. Some were rival bands of Homo sapiens. Others were Neanderthals. Denisovans are late surviving Homo erectus, close enough to fool the eye, but different enough to trigger caution. A Neanderthal stepping into your hunting ground. An Australopithecus lurking near your kids. Was this a friend, a potential mate, a killer? The Uncanny Valley might have been that finely tuned warning system. An instinct to instantly assess faces that were almost human, but not quite. It could explain why the feeling is so immediate. You have to wonder, could this instinct be responsible for the extinction of every other species of human? It's possible. Everywhere we went, extinction followed for the local hominins. Even though we bred with some of them, this may have only happened occasionally. Even today, humans have a tendency to meet the other with hostility. So where does that leave us? We no longer share the earth with Neanderthals or Denisovans. And yet, that fear remains. It's that same jolt, the same instinct, ancient and untouched by time. It's a remnant of a prehistoric world filled with threats we can barely imagine. A world where seeing another upright figure in the dark might mean death. And maybe that's why this fear lingers. Because long ago, it kept us alive,